And then, of course, on Saturday evening, the return of Melbourne from the one and only Jello Biafra, a punk icon, political activist, agitator, spoken word artist, satirist, and definitely a tireless campaigner for free speech, freedom of expression, equality and human rights. Jello's definitely made for essential listening since his days fronting the Dead Kennedys, and since their demise in the mid-'80s after 4 albums and a bunch of other stuff. Biafra has continued to make music with a number of different collaborators, the Melvins, Ministry, No Means No, and a few others. He's also stayed at the helm of his indie label, Alternative Tentacles. He's run for political office. He's been in court a number of times, and of course he's forged a new career as an acclaimed spoken word artist, one that has brought him here for the Melbourne Festival. Welcome the man himself to the studios of Triple R for the first time in, many years. Welcome back to Australia.
Hi, everybody.
You were last here in 2003, and that piece itself predates that. I think it's about 10 years old, but what's changed?
I think I did it when I was here in 95. It used to be the way I'd close my show for a while with that one. And so it was done at the height of, some of the first things that really, truly ushered in the current robber baron era that we're living in. And keep in mind, it wasn't Clown Prince W, George Bush and all those gangsters who were running things then. This was Democrats. It was Bill Clinton. It was Al Gore. They were in charge, yet they were the ones who rammed through the so-called free trade treaty with Mexico and Canada, which was called NAFTA, and then went global on it, went postal on us, whatever you want to say. The General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, the GATT Treaty, which created the WTO, the World Trade Organization. A lot of these seeds for the economic collapse and chaos going on now were planted by the Clintonoids, including repealing a law called the Glass-Steagall Act. And yes, it's an American law. Nobody's going to remember that name, but this is important because that was put in during the last Great Depression in the 1930s to make sure another one didn't happen. It said that banks and brokerages and insurance companies couldn't all cross over and start playing in other people's ponds and start turning all of Wall Street and the economic system into a casino with other people's money. But that got thrown out when Clinton was president, causes a new depression. And who does the Barack star, Barack Obama, pick to try and get us out of it? But the exact same people from Clinton's administration who got us into the mess in the first place.
Yes.
The Treasury Secretary, Tim Geithner, he was on the team back then. The Treasury Secretary for Clinton was Robert Rubin. And he was considered, he was the greatest secretary ever because so many rich people got richer who owned the media. So therefore he was great. And all these people like Larry Summers and Geithner worked under him. And Geithner is so crooked, he may yet get indicted if this investigation is still going on in the state of New York, where he was head of the New York part of the Federal Reserve, and apparently even then was pulling strings to make sure certain big brokerages like Lehman Brothers went under and Goldman Sachs got all the money. And if he gets indicted right before the 2012 election, Obama's going down.
Yeah. It's very relevant because, of course, around the world at the moment and in Melbourne, Occupy Melbourne is happening. And obviously people are taking to the streets about this very thing. Have you been down to the Occupy?
Not yet. Hopefully I'll get there either tonight or tomorrow to at least say hi if they're interested or whatever.
I'm sure they would be.
Show a little love and support. I mean, it's about time something like this happened.
Well, it's surprising that it's taken so long, really, in terms of New York. I'm surprised.
Well, I think the reason is because you have to actually come to America to realize how utterly censored the media is now. It's like it's not just Rupert Murdoch, but everybody else wants to be Rupert Murdoch because they see all the money he's making and slant their own media outlets that way. After all, they're now owned and run by the same rich people who want to take everybody else's money, steer it in that direction. Dumb down the news to the point where you're not talking about 20 stories or 30 stories per news hour. You talk about one Or 2, is it Tiger Woods' penis? How long can we drag out Tiger Woods' penis? How many months can we have people all preoccupied with Tiger Woods' penis? Ooh, the oil blew up in the Gulf of Mexico. Oh, bad. Okay, we'll pretend to be all liberal and complain about everything getting destroyed and stretch that out for 3 or 4 months and have nothing else. And now, when people are getting really angry, we must make sure that their anger is focused on a handful of politicians or, anti-pop stars, targets, in other words, instead of focusing on the people who are stealing their money, putting them out of work, whatever. No, you want them to be mad at Obama. You want them to be mad at immigrants, especially if the immigrants aren't white people and stuff. Do it that way. And if you're really, really mad, we've got just the thing for you. Tea Party. Then you're allowed to get mad as long as you vent your rage at people who are even more disadvantaged than you are, or get all cut up in wacky conspiracy theories that the United Nations is going to come into town and take your precious guns away or something like that. But that only works for so many people. And the other half of the equation is that a lot of the people who are so inspired to finally get off their ass and vote and take part because Obama sounded so cool when you saw him speak and things like that, well, afterwards, a lot of them, just like when Clinton got in, and he also ran on the word hope, by the way. He was called the man from Hope because I guess as a real little kid, he lived in Hope, Arkansas, but he mainly grew up in Hot Springs, which is a mob resort town. That's where he learned how to,
the rough and tumble.
Yeah, exactly. Bringing mint juleps to some of the most corrupt people in the country, and they'll show you how it's done.
They probably funded his campaign.
Oh, undoubtedly. But the people, both Clinton and Obama, hooray, hooray, ding dong, the Bush is gone. Now we can sleep easier. And they just went to sleep. Oh, hey, well, moveon.org, that'll do my work for me. Oh, hey, I can't be bothered to, keep a blowtorch up Obama's ass to make sure any of the change I hoped for actually happens. No, I'm too busy updating my Facebook page. And that was what people fell into. And now, finally, the corporate media be damned and bazillion dollars put behind the Tea Party by Texas oil barons while Occupy Wall Street has nothing. It's happening anyway. One of the corporate McNews outlets, I think it was Time Magazine, even took a poll of Americans, and the support for Occupy Wall Street has already doubled the support for the Tea Party.
You mentioned Facebook then. Surely...
I think Farcebook might be a better name, but go on.
The flip side of that is the power of the internet in actually disseminating the kind of information that, needs to get around about Occupy Melbourne.
That's true. That's totally true. Twitter also, neither of which I partake in personally.
Well, I know you're a bit of a Luddite in terms of, the internet, and you're on record as
But even here, the person driving me here seemed so envious that I don't have a computer in my house. I was like, if I could only get rid of mine type deal. It owns me. And that's going to have to change eventually. I didn't do this for political reasons. I just never had time. And then I get bombarded with so much stuff in the alternative tentacles computers. I'm like, hey, wait a minute. Do I really want to have to be checking my email for the first 4 hours of every day just to get back to everybody at my slow typing speed because their short Twitter-size attention spans get all hurt if you don't respond to them within hours? And is it really that important to see what person from my school days is trying to find me on Facebook? I don't have time.
Yeah, well, that's the small social side of it. The larger side of it is, one of your catch cries over the years has been, don't hate the media, be the media, and really technology and the internet has opened that up. It's made that possible.
I agree with that. No, I think that's true.
I mean, look at what happened in Lebanon. People can film stuff on their mobile phones. And
you're thinking of Libya?
Oh, sorry, Libya. Yeah. And then it's all around the world, So surely the power of the state has been, diminished in some ways by...
I'm not sure it's been diminished that much. I mean, there's these new tools to use for things like getting rid of Gaddafi or, I'd really love to see this happen to the Saudi royal family, although that's a much more parallel example of what we're up against in fighting the equivalent in America and Australia and the Western industrialized world of the Saudi royals. The Saudi royals, keep in mind, there's about 3,000 to 5,000 of them, and they just steal everything and use religion and all these other things to keep everybody just beaten way, way down. And that's what they're trying to bring in over here, is more and more of that. Thus the immigrant bashing and the Tea Party governors saying all of a sudden you can't have a union anymore if you're employed by the government. And the one in Michigan even got a law through that these same Texas oil barons, the Koch brothers who fund the Tea Party, wrote for them saying that the governor can dissolve any city government that he wants to, declare it dysfunctional, and appoint a financial manager. And it was already done to one city called Benton Harbor, which is a poor African-American town, who was resisting having outside people turn their public park at the beach on Lake Michigan into a very elite private golf course. So that the governor dissolved the town, basically, so they could put the golf course in.
Yes.
Yeah, and so my feelings on the internet and technology, I think the technology itself is not evil. It's good. It's a good thing to have more tools. But when it crosses the line from people using the tools to the tools and the people who own the machinery using them, that's where one of my little corollaries, caveats, whatever, to become the media is be smart about this, and educate other people as to how corporate media lies. But now that goes as far as don't just question authority, question bloggers. And don't live on your phone all day, or you'll become the exact kind of asshole that I don't want to have my time wasted by. Period.
Jello Biafra is with me in the Triple R studios. If you've just tuned in, it's 5:30 here on Triple R. And Jello's here for the Melbourne Festival, 2 shows tomorrow. And last year in 2003. Before that, Dead Kennedys tour, wasn't it, back in the early 80s? Is that kind of it for you? I haven't missed a tour there somewhere, have I?
Yeah, there's been 2 Australian tours, the 95 one and the 03 one, spoken word, and then Dead Kennedys came, the real Dead Kennedys came in 1983.
83. Now that Dead Kennedys show is really sort of the stuff of legend here in Australia, because it was at a time when not many bands toured, unlike now where everybody comes every 5 minutes.
I was shocked when Dead Kennedys got to Australia. What, the damned have never been here? They go everywhere. No UK subs, no Exploited even. I am thinking now, I realize I'm thinking of British bands where it takes even longer and costs even more money to fly to Australia from Britain than it does from the United States.
Well, airfares were so expensive, and there was a small audience, I suppose, for shows, and
not that small.
Yeah.
I mean, the way it was done back then was, I don't know whether you just do one city and one show in Melbourne and then go to the next city. But back then, you had to play the neighborhoods, so to speak. So there was at least 1 or 2 St. Kilda shows. There was one at Monash University. There was one at some, what I would call a sports bar outside of town with a somewhat bewildered audience, but they came. And the same with Sydney, where we had to play several different neighborhoods and only one person showed up to all the shows.
Oh, fantastic.
Explaining that a lot of people don't even leave their neighborhoods, don't know where any of these other places are, which to my horror, I have confirmed when I found I had to direct Sydney cab drivers to where I was going, because otherwise they didn't know how to get there, and I wasn't even going that far. It was just one neighborhood to another neighborhood, and already, I don't know how to get there. So that was the reason we had to do all the hoods, basically. And at least 1 or 2 of the Melbourne shows were in pretty large venues. I think first we played the basement in a place, and then we played the upstairs. There was a big old dance hall or something.
Yeah. Emotions ran pretty high at those Dead Kennedys shows, didn't they? Not only, I'm not talking about, I didn't see the Australian shows, but seeing footage of the Dead Kennedys performing back in the day, there was a lot of rough and tumble, wasn't there, in terms of the way that
Well, it's a very volatile kind of music.
Yes, that's right.
It would draw a lot of volatile people from many different stripes, and plus, I mean, it was such a way of releasing energy that people wanted to release all of it.
Yeah. And
not everybody played rugby or football, so there was other ways to go bounce off of people, and instead of having a coach telling you to win, you could enjoy cool music instead without having to pay an astronomical high price to see some tiny little dot of an arena rock pop star way off in the distance on some stage with 15,000 other people in a basketball arena where everybody had to sit down.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, the thing was, you weren't afraid to challenge the audience with your lyrics, were you? In the Dead Kennedys,
Well, that's
kill
kind
the
of
poor.
what punk was for, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, of course. Yeah, but I'm thinking, Nazi punks fuck off and all that sort of stuff. It was inflammatory in some ways, wasn't it? And you got reactions, and you were able to sort of discuss issues on the back of that.
Yeah.
Okay. 25
It's
minutes.
kind of the idea. I mean,
Yeah.
those songs are too short to fill them with boring lyrics.
Yeah.
I mean, it's bad enough when it was one after another, I hate nuclear war, I hate nuclear war. Now, let's at least be clever about this and tap into my old method acting training, and I'll write it from the point of view of the Pentagon, and then came Kill the Poor. But even 1 million songs against nuclear war, the system sucks, I would take that over these kissy-ass pop punk we have today, which, the same old dumb, broken heart girly poo lyrics that was what the original punks were rebelling against. So much, I mean, some of the pop punk bands who got really big got there because they were talented and they deserved to be where they are. Then there's the rest of them. And, every time Alternative Tentacles gets another demo that winds up sounding like the Eagles with loud guitars, out of my stereo it goes. Quickly.
Punk used to be, very broadly defined, I suppose, didn't it? Back,
well, then it was narrowly defined because the major labels did not want punk. By 78 or so, they just quit touching it, at least in the United States. And, you want to have anything to do with us, you have to be a new wave band.
Right.
And before, that was the umbrella term where everything from Blondie to the Ramones to whatever was all new wave. And people embraced all of it because it was anti-70s and anti the stupidity that the 70s music scene had become by then. But then the majors kind of narrowed it down. You put on a little skinny pink tie and a jacket and bounce around and smile and sing a song about the radio, and maybe you'll even get on the radio. But this other stuff, it's too negative. And besides, who are you compared to Bob Seger? We don't need to deal with you. We're looking for the next Springsteen, not the next Sex Pistols. We're looking for the next Olivia Newton-John. And so, in a way, it's so much more so in America than in other places, the hostility from the industry to punk was just across the board. Last band to sign to a major label was the Dickies, and I heard that Leonard had an uncle in A&M, and that's the only reason he got signed. But after that, nothing until Husker Du, close to a decade later, because after that, the majors' other game was, you put out an independent record, we will never touch you. And also, according to Geza X, there was a law put through by yet another Democrat, Jimmy Carter, as a favor to the people who ran Capricorn Records, Allman Brothers, Marshall Tucker, that kind of thing, was that you could write off a failed music album 7 years in a row, like a failed real estate investment. So at a certain point, unless you got somebody who got mega huge, it was in the major label's best interest to fail. Thus, even after the Knack got big and Blondie did well and suddenly New Wave and Talking Heads and everything were all cool, they were more interested in bad versions of that would fail for that reason. But the benefit for the American underground was, instead of being defanged, punk got more and more and more extreme. The people who stayed on didn't care if a major label signed them. They had other ideas, as much to find a way to enjoy, hopefully do their part to sabotage the capitalist system in a lot of cases. And
so it's quite liberating, really, for the scene in some ways.
Punk evolved into hardcore. And by the time Dead Kennedys came to Australia, hardcore had hit as well. And we were kind of playing both, and a little bit of, like some people would say, Holiday in Cambodia, or the backside of plastic surgery disasters were almost goth or something. But we just played what came out of us.
Yes.
I mean, even today, I try to widen the base of the pyramid with my music. It's punk spirit and punk inspired, but I'm proud that no two of my music albums have ever sounded the same.
Yes.
Not even the Lard albums. So to me, that's far more punk than doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again.
Adhering to a genre, yes. You mentioned before your former bandmates touring here as the Dead Kennedys, and I guess your legal battles over royalties and the use of songs has been really fairly well documented, and clearly there's no love lost there. But how does it make you feel to see them kind of touring the world as the Dead Kennedys without you?
Well, I think the motives behind it, what kind of people they've turned into, just breaks my heart. To go through that much stuff together and find other people not only have learned nothing, but are as greedy as Dick Cheney or any of the people supporting the banks right now. They wish they were those people, basically. And I've seen no evidence since Dead Kennedys broke up that Ray and Klaus even like the music, for example. You know, it's like all our other bands failed. Let's just cash in. And, I've said it a million times. I'll say it again. The whole lawsuit on me was a scam from the very beginning. It was a total scam to try and swipe away the rights to everything. So I now have no say in how Dead Kennedys is pimped. And I emphasize the word pimped. I'm not even allowed to see all the books.
Right.
You know, there's only one person in the band who does and 3 guesses as to who that is. And that was the scam, basically. Yes, there was an accounting error of Alternative Tentacles' part that I have to take responsibility for, and I'm sorry about that. But when we, not they, discovered what it was, we paid them in full, all of it, instantly. And then they sued, claiming conspiracy. You know, it was all a scam.
Yes. Yeah, very unfortunate.
And that's how they've treated Dead Kennedys ever since. And that's what makes me so mad.
Yes.
You know, they bragged about not rehearsing and, they just go down, take people's money and skip off to the next town, and that's it. And I think that's wrong.
Yes. Well, it's arguable whether it can be the Dead Kennedys without you anyway, Jello. So, 20 minutes away from 6 o'clock, we are going to come back and talk more with Jello in a moment, including talk of Jello's new band. But first, we're going to revisit Dead Kennedys. From Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables, the Dead Kennedys, and Kill the Poor here on Triple R. Jello Biafra is with me in the Triple R studios this afternoon ahead of his 2 spoken word shows. And Jello, after the Dead Kennedys broke up in the mid-'80s, you sort of launched a spoken word career, and you've been involved in a lot of other things, some musical collaborations with people, but it's only been recently that you've kind of grouped your own band together for the first time. And what sort of took you so long?
Oh, adventures, good and bad. I think the greedy ex-band member's lawsuit probably derailed the whole thing 4 years right there.
Yeah.
But spoken word just started out reading alleged poetry in coffee house type settings, and then when Tipper Gore and her buddies from the far Christian right started attacking music, and I wound up being the one put on trial over the contents of Dead Kennedys' Frankenchrist album, it kind of vaulted me into another dimension, and suddenly I was being brought into universities as a lecturer an expert on censorship. And instead of a lecture, they got the spoken word show, but I knew so many bones were buried in relation to Tipper Gore and the other religious right bigots involved in that I had a lot to talk about.
Yes.
It didn't hurt that a roommate at the time, a journalist, had a whole file on Tipper Gore and the religious right connections that she was trying to interest me in. And I thought, well, this is getting a little too sky is falling for me. And then the cops tear the house apart, and they took that file away, by the way.
Right.
And I thought, oh, this is real, and at least I've got some background now and stuff.
It's a while since I've seen new editions of the Frankenchrist album. Is the Geiger picture still a part of the artwork, or was that kind of right?
No,
okay.
A lot of stuff has been dumbed down in the more recent editions of the Dead Kennedys albums that I'm not very happy about.
Yeah,
so I put a lot of time into that art and conceived all the packaging things with each one and stuff. And some of the stuff they've done to Dead Kennedys is kind of like spray painting a McDonald's logo on the Mona Lisa, as far as I'm concerned. But no, Giger is gone.
Yes.
They don't want anything to do with that ever again.
Yes.
They weren't into it in the first place.
That case over Frankenchrist was very much, as you said, it was a watershed moment in terms of, censorship in America. And you've gone on to talk a lot about that.
Well, Tipper's music attacks were not forgotten.
Yeah.
And people may blame Ralph Nader and the Green Party, which I'm a member of, for costing Al Gore the 2000 election. But I think Tipper had a lot more to do with it than we did, because Gore didn't get much youth support at all. He just couldn't seem to inspire any excitement in people. And even that long after the hate campaign campaign. I mean, all I had to do was mention the name of that bitch on stage, and people would start booing and hissing. And some of them could barely been in kindergarten when she was doing that stuff. But people knew, and they were angry.
Yes.
I mean, I think the main reason that election got twisted the way it was that Gore threw away being able to get Florida back. Sure, he was bitching and moaning about so-called dimpled Chads and the old Jewish lady vote disappearing in a part of Miami area, but tens of thousands of African Americans were also prevented from voting all over Florida, and he didn't do a thing for them. And there were several other states where this would happen. He didn't fight.
Yes.
And John Kerry admitted a year or two after 2004 that Bush had probably stolen that election, too, the same way. You know, the problem with touchscreen digital voting machines is other people can change the votes. He didn't fight either. He threw the election.
Jello, there's been a whole lot of questions coming in via Facebook. One of them from a listener pertains to Al Gore. With respect to his current environmental, campaigns, and the fact that he has very much sort of reinvented himself on that. How do you feel about Gore in the light of comments, all the comments you've made about him?
I support his environmental work 100%. I mean, with people like the Tea Party and the John Howard and Tony Abbott types totally going the opposite direction, and how dare you slap a carbon tax on us, blah, blah, blah. I think he's doing good work in that area, and I hope he continues to do good work in that area and never enters electoral politics again.
Yes. That question was...
ironically, when he finally finds an issue he actually cares about besides getting himself elected president, then Tipper quits him, and they're separated now. I don't think they're divorced, but there was a very public separation announcement.
That question was from Sarah Burke. I wanted to ask you about, you've run for office a few times.
Twice.
Well, twice, yes. Famously for mayor back in 1979 on the back of, serious platforms and also some satirical kind of platforms, like getting everyone to dress in clown suits. Getting the businessmen to dress.
It was the business community needed to wear clown suits because the person who won the mayoral election, who some people may have even heard of her down here because she's a right-wing Democrat, mean little senator named Dianne Feinstein. She's a national figure now. But as mayor, she was the Margaret Thatcher of San Francisco.
Right.
And might as well, again, like so many of the big-time Democrats, she should have just been a Republican. But she was a very, very mean witch of a creature. The police were completely out of control in the way you would think of when you think of Joe Bielke Peterson in Queensland or something. And one of her things, she was going to clean up Market Street, the main downtown thoroughfare, because there is an end of it called the Tenderloin that's been a low-income and Skid Row area for many generations and still is a dangerous place. But I thought, hey, wait a minute, let's clean up the other end of Market Street where Bank of America and Chevron Oil and Bechtel Construction and others, their headquarters are there. That's where they do the dirty work. Okay, clown suits between business hours of 9 and 5. And that was the one the media picked up on. Of all of them, that's the only one that seemed to have gotten around a lot of places.
It's very visual. We can all picture it.
I mean, I thought there were some great ideas in there that I still support, like that police officers should be elected. I think it's a really good idea. It would cut down a lot of police brutality cases and things. Maybe even a lot of corruption among the police as well, if they have to answer to the people who, they have to live in the neighborhood, they'd have to live where they patrol, and I think it's a really good idea, 4-year terms.
Yes.
And, of course, somebody with a background and training is going to have a leg up, so it's not as though the police force would fall apart or anything. And even though it was satirical at the time, it's gotten so out of control with, the kleptocracy that's fastest for government worldwide now that I thought in San Francisco creating a board of bribery to set public and standard rates for liquor licenses, building code exemptions, and police protection, and most importantly, protection from the police.
Yes.
But make the rates the same for everybody, make them public. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. Why not? Thomas Bailey has posted a question. How do you feel now that Jerry Brown's governor of California again? And is your view of him different now as opposed to, the inspiration of California Uber alles?
Well, yeah, the scary side of Jerry Brown, and especially his followers and people who went from 60s rebels to yuppies or new age clowns or whatever, wanting a guru to tell them what to do. That was the original motive. Then Reagan storms into power instead. So I thought, okay, that was a great little pet theory of mine. I thought of it all by myself, but Jerry Brown wasn't exactly the new Hitler or Antichrist after all, was he? So then came the second version of California Uber Alice called We Got a Bigger Problem Now. And then I did another one with the live shows I did with the Melvins, as well as the ones with my current band, Guantanamo School of Medicine, has a Schwarzenegger version. Steroids for the master race so you all can have my face. Things like that. It's almost become like a folk song where people keep updating the words. Yeah. Michael Franti, when he was with Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy before he was doing Spearhead, had one about Governor Pete Wilson.
Yeah, we heard that earlier.
And I think Attila the Stockbroker in England had one about Thatcher called Boadicea Uber Alice. And several different ones about Bush got emailed in, and at least one was quite well written. But,
you should post them. They should be given their own Facebook page.
I'll let somebody else handle that. I don't have the time. It's not a bad idea, though.
You ran.
But as far as Brown now, he's in a different situation because the governor doesn't have that much power anymore compared to what he had at the time. And at the same time, the legislature, due in part to manipulation from oil barons and Tea Party types, they gridlock on everything and can't agree on anything. So even though the state is going broke and he has a majority in the legislature, he can't fix it. And I think he thought he'd be able to wave a little more of a magic wand and knock some heads together and break the stalemate. But so far, I don't think he's having a whole lot of fun being governor of California.
Jello, we were talking before about when you ran for mayor, and was it about 10 or so years ago you ran for the presidential nomination for the Greens Party of America?
That kind of fell into my lap. Some people at the New York State Green Party convention nominated me, and I came in second to Ralph Nader. So then they contacted me and asked me if I'd run, and only about the second or third conversation did it come up, "Oh, you are a Green, aren't you?" Nader wasn't. He was an independent, but he just was willing to use the party's mantle and everything. And so I thought, I'll at least throw my hat in the ring. I haven't penciled in running for president on my calendar, and greedy ex-band members are about to drag me through a show trial and everything. And when they could have settled it with one conversation, so I didn't have a lot of time. But I figured if I just left my name on the ballot a little bit and just got the word out, that it would inspire people to get off their butts and register and show up to vote, and hopefully vote smart, and check out the Green Party and Nader for President websites. And it did add a badly needed punk rock and roll element to the Green Party.
Did you run a similar campaign, a similar sort of satirical campaign to that which you ran in the late 70s?
Slightly less so, because the scrutiny was different. And even if I ran for mayor of San Francisco again, I'd have to do it differently this time, because it would be taken more seriously. And there's just about to be another mayoral election in San Francisco, so I went to one of the candidate debates, and the kind of nuts and bolts budgetary stuff they were talking about and different issues affecting different things, I thought this time I'd have to know all that stuff as well as they do, or I wouldn't have any business running.
Yeah, exactly. Do you really want to be part of a political machine like that, or isn't being outside that system a better, avenue, more freedom for you?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, people always listen to artists more than they listen to politicians. Why do you think politicians find artists so threatening?
Or invite artists to run for presidential
executed
nomination?
folk singer Victor Jara right off the bat when he took over Chile in that American-directed coup. And and they still beat up on artists a lot in America now. There's nowhere something like the Melbourne Festival, which I understand has sponsors and gets a lot of City of Melbourne money, if I recall. They don't do that in America. They might put money into the opera or something, but otherwise, you work for Disney or you shouldn't be an artist. You should all want to be on American Idol or whatever they call the Australian equivalent. and or I guess it's Britain's Got Talent or X Factor, any of those. That's okay, but otherwise you shouldn't be an artist. We're not going to give you any money. We're not going to give you any support. And hey, if we're the police, we might even beat you up. But it's because they're scared of what artists say. At first, any artist who came out against Bush invading Iraq was just vilified in the American media. These same right-wing pre-Tea Party radio people were even having steamroller ceremonies to crush all the Dixie Chicks CDs. Never mind, their sales went up after they criticized Bush. The corporate media didn't tell you that part. You had to get that from Michael Moore, unless you read the trade mags. But, so an artist must not be political or have an opinion on anything that matters, unless, of course, you're Arnold Schwarzenegger or you're Hank Williams Jr. comparing Obama to Hitler, or Toby Keith, one of the first country guys to have a rah-rah war hit after Bush invaded Afghanistan and his career got resurrected. That's okay. Godsmack telling people to join the army and fight in Iraq even though they didn't do it themselves. That's okay. But if you have an opinion that isn't extreme right wing, that's not okay. It's sports figures and athletic stars are even more tightly controlled that way.
Yes. It's 5 minutes, a little under 5 minutes away from 6 here on Triple R. Jello Biafra with me on Kinky Afro this afternoon, and a few more questions here, Jello, from Triple R listeners. This one's from Russell Myers. Jello changed his name to honour the stillborn state of Biafra, but now if you put Biafra into Google, you mostly get Jello, not the country. Why don't you stop using your stage name so the country gets more prominence?
Why don't I keep using my stage name so the country gets more prominence? Think about it, you netwit. You've got better things to think about than this. My God. I did get a call once from somebody in Canada who was a refugee of the Biafra Independence War, and he asked me if I would speak at a convention, a reunion of the people who fought that war. Unfortunately, they never got it organized, and a lot of them were still in Nigeria and didn't have the money to fly to Montreal. But, I was very touched. They would even ask. And he admitted that part of the reason he asked was that, whenever he tried to find stuff about his own stillborn country, he kept coming up with me and began to wonder who I was. But how many people younger than I am, and I'm 53, would even know about the Biafra War if I hadn't used that name? I mean, the only other person besides that clown who ever objected to my name was Jesse Jackson, of all people.
He's in good company then, isn't he?
Does this have anything to do with the Igbo or the Yoruba? Yes, it does. Interesting. And he'd walked away. How many people does this guy know who ever dropped their stage name out of misguided lefty guilt?
This connects.
Okay, this last one better be a better question than that one. Pick a good one.
I like that last question. It got the blood flowing, Jello.
Look how much time it took.
This Suzanne Donisthorpe asked this one. What happens when you make your mark as an angry young man and you live to be a middle-aged man? How does time play with perspective, and is anger still an energy, in the words of John Lydon?
I don't know about him. He even does butter commercials in England. That kind of life is not for me. I never got as wealthy as he did by any stretch of the imagination either. I mean, he lives in Malibu, California. But I think just as long as people act as dumb as they do, and things are as corrupt and frightening as they are, especially when the entire climate of the earth is hanging in the balance, and anybody having a child now has to wonder what kind of a quality of life that child's going to have when they're their age, I'm never going to run out of material. Mm-hmm.
That's right. And her part two was
and now I have to do my little plug here. You can always gauge whether I've run out of the necessary spirit and adrenaline by checking out the new band, Jello Biafra from the Guantanamo School of Medicine.
That's a very timely moment to talk about your new band. I alluded to it before, Jello Biafra and the Guantanamo Bay School of Medicine. Obvious question, how does it feel to be fronting your own band again? It must be, exhilarating.
Well, it is. I mean, there's certain things when I get in the room with people and we make that kind of noise, I feel more alive.
Yes.
I'm not going to abandon the political work or the activism. Spoken word has been on hiatus until this show in Melbourne. So you're kind of getting a unique one that I'm still preparing as we speak. But no, I mean, I realized that when I was with political people, this really separated me, that I was still kind of really rough around the edges. And I came from a rock background. That's still a very, very important part of my spirit. What do I do for fun? I listen to music. So, I mean, I'm very grateful that anybody would be interested in anything I do after all these years, let alone the amount of interest there is.
Yes.
But it also, it puts kind of a good pressure on in a way that if I'm going to do something new and not just play a bunch of old songs as an oldies review, I better make them good. I think the gold standard for that, and granted this is a reformed reunion band rather than a brand new band, but was just how surprised and blown away I was when I saw Radio Birdman the first time they ever played in San Francisco a few years ago. And it wasn't Radio Birdman light at all. They were really bringing the energy and blew the roof off the venue. And Dennis Tech was putting so much physical energy into his guitar playing. He was like a 21-year-old in a hardcore band, and he wasn't missing a note. I was saying, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm capable of. Settle for nothing less.
Yes.
And so hopefully, within a year or less, I can get the Gitmo School of Meds down here.
Well, there's a number of questions on the Facebook page about that. There are a lot of people very keen to see you performing here in Australia again with a band.
Yeah. And I guess apparently the festivals all rejected it. So we have to
Too
find
noisy.
another way to skin the cat because with airfares and expenses being what they are, unfortunately, and I've learned this the hard way, in Europe, you got to get at least a couple of anchor festival dates or something, or you take home nothing in the end, because by and large, otherwise, with club shows, we're getting about the same numerically as Dead Kennedys got in the early 80s. But everything else, from ticket prices to petrol prices to accommodations to the insurance that the venue has to pay in order to put the show on, has gone up astronomically. Only the band's fee has stayed the same, and it doesn't go nearly as far as it did when the rental and whatnot, pay you a place to live, has also just gone through the ceiling. So we do what we can, but I have no illusions about getting wealthy over this. I just do it because I want to do it.
Who's in the band at the present?
Ralph Spite, who I don't know whether Victim's Family ever played in Australia or not. They're kind of played a lot of shows with No Means No, another one of those kind of bands we had on Alternative Tentacles. And Chemo Ball, who was another guitarist that Ralph turned me on to, who said he's the only guitarist he'd ever heard who made him feel like he better go back and practice after he jammed with him. So I thought, okay, let's check him out. And he's in. And Billy Gould from Faith No More, when I asked him at a ministry show if he knew any real good bass players, he nominated himself. But then Faith No More, to his own surprise, reformed. So I'm grateful he stuck around long enough to lay down the bass on the recordings, and then he had to go back into Faith No More. And we had John Weiss on drums, and then his brother Andrew Weiss, who Australians may remember from Rollins Band and Ween and Butthole Surfers. They have been the rhythm section until recently, but John wants to move on now and amicable parting, and Andrew lives clear across the country in New Jersey, so we just weren't practicing enough. So, and Andrew just became a father too.
Well, all pretty seasoned musicians, really. It's not like you're using kind of kids in their early 20s,
Yeah, well, I kind of, at some degree, go with people I know, basically, which is the downfall of many an older musician. Chemo was an unknown. I mean, he looks like he's 18, but he's actually over 40.
Yeah. Well, it would be sensational to see you with them in Australia, so I hope that does happen. You've had one album and a recent EP out. enhanced methods of questioning. That's the latest EP.
Yeah, it's an old Bush administration term for waterboarding and things.
Is that right?
I mean, the whole reason for the name, again, is because, hey, come on, Barack Star, you said you were going to shut Guantanamo down and no more torture, and you've done neither. I mean, okay, it's written in writing you're not supposed to torture Muslims anymore, but instead, now America is torturing its own citizens. There's a soldier named Bradley Manning who's accused of leaking footage onto WikiLeaks, and I'm very pro WikiLeaks, by the way, showing American, I think it was a helicopter, killing unarmed Iraqi civilians. A war crime, in other words, the kind of thing you're supposed to blow the whistle on.
It's had a lot of airplay
just like
here,
people who exposed the My Lai massacre in Vietnam and things like that. But instead of learning the lessons of My Lai, what do Obama and crew do? But they've been holding Bradley Manning in solitary confinement, cameras on him, and I think the lights are on 24 hours a day, naked. He's not even allowed any clothes. He's not allowed to wear his glasses to see. And there's already been documented cases of people we've done this kind of thing to in Guantanamo Bay or Bagram, which Obama spent $60 million expanding, by the way, or Abu Ghraib, where too much of solitary and these kind of torture, part of the reason they're still holding those people at Guantanamo Bay is they're scared to bring them to trial because they've gone clinically insane.
Well, I don't know whether you've heard of David Hicks, but he was an Australian who was locked in.
I have,
Guantanamo Bay. So the whole Guantanamo Bay thing has had a lot of attention here, a lot of public anger over the incarceration of David Hicks, and in particular over the retrospective nature of the laws that they passed about, terrorism and colluding with the enemy and all of these things.
And those things had to be passed by the House and the Senate so Clown Prince W could sign them. And you know who voted yes on all that stuff was a senator named Barack Obama. That was why I refused to vote for him. Even I had a teeny bit of hope that things might get slightly better and wrote that big, long letter to Obama that's still up on the Alternative Tentacles website.
I've read that letter. It's a great read, the open letter to Obama from Jello Biafra.
Well, it also is the downside of digital netwititude, because the responses that came in, people usually not even using their own names and putting little cartoons of angry birds beside it and stuff with, he's so old, he shouldn't be saying anything anymore. What's the matter with him? Why does he stop whining? And that was all they would say. They couldn't write any more sentences because their brains were no longer past the first grade. It was Twitter brains instead. And I realized that the smart use of the net trumps that many times over. But you got to admit they have a hell of a lot less guts than Julian Assange.
Yes. Absolutely. We're going to leave it at that, Jello, because I know you've got other things to do, and you've got to save some chat for your spoken word show this weekend as part of the Melbourne Festival. You're still putting it together from what you said before.
The two shows may be different from each other too. If I wind up running out of time at one, I may switch and do other things at the other one. I don't know.
Okay.
Originally, it's, oh my God, how am I going to fill up an hour? But typical me, I think I may be up to 3 now, and they only want me to go for an hour. So we'll see what happens.
The evening show is sold out, but there are still tickets available for the afternoon show on Saturday, and I'll have a double pass for that to give away shortly. And there's also a panel discussion, I believe, after that event, which will be an interesting one. So thank you for your time this afternoon, and to all our listeners who posted questions as well. And let's go out with something from the Enhanced Methods of Questioning release from Jello Biafra and the Guantanamo Bay School of Medicine, The Cells That Will Not Die. See ya.